We called those guys up, yo, that kid after school today, don't let him get on the bus. And then after school, we went into the principal's office and said, how's your son? And he was like, how do you know my son? I don't know your son, I'm just asking, how is he? Like, he's fine. Where is he at? He's at home. I don't think so. You know, and we weren't like selling little drugs. We'd go into Mexico, work with the cartels, bring like major stuff over. The cartels would use us as foot soldiers. So the cartel would call you. There's only two reasons. Either they're going to reward you and give you a task and it's going to be really great, or they're going to kill you. And they would never kill you like dead. They would put you in there alive, light you up. That was supposed to be me in that grade. That's what the plan was. You can't imagine looking at your friend that you grew up with 9 holes in him that have taken like these chunks off of him. When I buried him, no girl went in with him, no car, no money, no influence, just him. It woke me up. What's the point of life?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Uthman ibn Farouk.
That's what they call me.
Who's Uthman ibn Farouk?
Sitting right here.
From shooter, Luke, AEK to a sensational worldwide da'i. How did that happen?
I don't know about the sensational part, but da'i, inshallah. It's a long story, and we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it will be a benefit for those watching, because sometimes a person might be caught up in a sinful lifestyle and feel that they can't get out of it, or they couldn't. But myself, for example, I didn't talk about my story for a long time. For years and years, I kind of buried it in my mind, didn't discuss it with my family, didn't tell anybody. Until I was reading the hadith about Umar ibn Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, when he talked about time of Jahiliyyah and making a statue from dates and eating it and so on. And one of my shaykh, he told me, look, if you share the story, maybe it will benefit people. So we hope from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala people will benefit from it. I'm Pashtun, Yusufzai tribe. We was born in Pakistan, but I left Pakistan when I was very young.
How old were you when you left?
I was about 6, 7 years old.
So do you still have memory of your childhood in Pakistan?
Yes, but not a lot. My father, he was like the head of all Pakistani police. We call the IG, but he was a very principled man. Like, he was Pashtun, and Pashtuns have little screws loose in their heads. So over something with the president named Yahya Khan, he was like, I'm out. So he resigned and he said, I'm going to leave. Alhamdulillah, we went to the UK first. So I lived in Manchester, Mancunians, where you at, for a year and a half. And then I moved to the US when I was 8, 9 years old in elementary school. I was too young. I was this little kid trying to go to school and snow hitting your face weather. When I was in UK, it was rough because it was very racially divided. So you had the Pakistanis fighting the whites, fighting the Jamaicans and stuff like that.
In UK?
Oh, in the UK, yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Even though we were little kids, but it was rough, but it wasn't that bad. You didn't get shot and things like that. It was just, fist fights and stuff. When I went to the US, it was a whole different ball game. So the funny thing is, I went to school, elementary school, little kid school, right? And my mom, may Allah reward her, may Allah protect her, she's still alive. Everybody make dua. Allah gives her a long, pious life. She dressed me up in a suit. Now imagine...
Thinking it's UK.
Thinking it's like a private school in Pakistan or UK or something, So imagine you're in the worst school, in the worst neighborhood. You're walking in with a suit and a little bow tie. And you go, hello, my name is Usman, how are you? Yeah, I got beat up that day. By the time I got home, my shirt was red, suit was red, black eye. I was like, what happened? I'm like, welcome to America, right? My parents didn't realize that the US has bad neighborhoods. In their mind, and as in the mind of many people overseas, the US is all Santa Barbara. It's all beautiful and green and rich and Hollywood, but it's not. Like, we were in a really bad neighborhood. We called the barrio, the Mexican gang infested hood, because we didn't have a choice. We were put into it. So for us, like, again, my mom was a wonderful woman. Allah protect her. She did her best. At the time she was divorced, her degrees in Pakistan were not recognized in the US. So she had to work 2 jobs. She used to work with 2 masters. Can you imagine? She was working as a Pakistani woman in a clothing factory, making t-shirts, and at the same time working as a security guard for criminals that were in hospitals. That was very difficult. May Allah bless her and reward her. She did that to provide for me. So I didn't have money at that time. And we used to wear those no-name brand shoes and walk into school with, used clothes and stuff, and it was difficult. But I didn't care about that. To be honest, I didn't say, "Well, I want to join a gang so I can have nice shoes." Nah, we didn't have any family. We knew no Muslims. I grew up with no Muslims around me.
So spiritually, you weren't exposed to Islam
No,
as much as...
My family was very secular, right? Alhamdulillah, we were Muslim, so they were from the very elite, educated, rather secular class of Pakistan. My father went to the US to study in the 50s. He had a master's at that time. So we were not like Salah and Ramadan things. We were more like, hey, it's Eid, woohoo,
Right.
Cultural.
Yeah. How were you exposed first to the gang?
So I didn't want to be a gangster. But when I was about 10, our school was heavily gangsters. So I go to school, and they saw that I could fight, that I could stand my ground. So they were very respectful, but I never wanted to join. My whole thing in life was I wanted to make my mother happy. I wanted to earn enough to get us out of the hood. So I was focused on that. I wasn't trying to get into gangs. But there was a kid from Iran, and again, he was not Muslim. His family was Shia, and they became Christian to come to the US because when they had the revolution there, the US was giving, if you're Irani Christian, you had like a guaranteed. So they, quote unquote, became Christian, even though they never went to church in their life, to come to the US. But because he was Irani, people were like, hey, he's from the Middle East and you're from Pakistan or whatever, and we used to hang out. But he was like a troublemaker. So one day he got into it, and these Mexican gang members that were much older than us, 3 of them big guys, he started fighting and they started beating him up. Now me, like I said, my father was one of those like crazy honor, Pukhtun, Ghairat kind of a guy. So
stand your ground. Stand
your ground, yeah. So I jumped in for him. So I jumped in and he ran away. So I got beat up, they got me, I was 12 years old at the time. And these were like 18-year-old guys, big guys, and kicked me in the head and all that, right? So when I went home, my mom saw me, I tried to hide it, but I can't, bloody mouth, big bloody eye, swollen all over, right? Ribs closed, to be honest, they probably broke a rib or two. I didn't go to the hospital, I didn't, because, I didn't want to get my mom worried, but I couldn't hide it. So she called my dad. My dad didn't live with us at the time. As I said, they were divorced. And when he came, he took me to the room by ourselves. He said, did you cry? I said, no. Did you run? No. He said, okay, that's it. You're good. Then he told me, okay, let's go find them. So he got a baseball bat. He had this big Camaro muscle car at the time. And we jumped in his car and we started looking. And the gangs, they have places where they post up. So this gang was called Lomas 27th Street. So this was a Sureño gang. And there were about 500 strong. But, obviously they don't 500 hang out at the same time. Only a few were hanging out. I saw the same guys. I told my father that's them. My father jumped out with a baseball bat, bashed him, broke one guy's shoulder.
Did you guys know they were part of a gang?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
My father didn't care.
It wasn't a mistake? Yeah.
No. Okay. No, they beat me up. We were paying them back, Pashtuns, right? So my father broke one of their shoulder, shattered his shoulder. The other one, he cracked his skull. The problem is, then my father got in his Camaro and went home, to his house that was far away from us,
And they followed him?
No. So, they're not going to follow him, but they know me, right? They're the one that got me. They go to my school. So the next day, I still remember it very vividly, and I was 12 at the time, is that I walked into my school, and I remember people going, there's the dead kid. He's the one that's going to get killed today, because Lomas is going to come today after school, and they're going to kill you because you just put 2 of their guys in a hospital, or your dad did, but you're the one that's going to pay for it, right? So one 12-year-old against 500 strong gang, numbers didn't look good. At that time, there was another gang called East Side San Diego. They came up to me, and I knew them. I went to school with them, and they said, look, we respect you. You can fight. You stand your ground. We've seen you in school. You're going to get killed. But if you want, join us and we'll protect you. We're 600 strong. We can take Lomas on. You're with us, they can't touch you.
And at that point, Uthman ibn Farouk had no choice but to join.
Welcome to the gang's life. It's not like what you see in the movies, like you're like, oh, I want to be like that guy. I want to sell drugs. No.
It's not a cool story.
It's not. It's reality. And reality is that it was, death or gang. And I didn't really feel like dying at 12, so I took the offer.
Do you pledge allegiance, or you do something like... there is a protocol.
Yeah, so you get jumped in, which, depending on the gang, how they do it. Usually, for Sureño, it's a 13-second fight, basically. Well, it's not a fight. Like 10 guys will come and attack you, and you have to stand your ground. If you run, then you won't be in the gang, and you'll get them. You will get beat really bad. And then you don't get in the gang, and you get a beating like possibly would kill you. So
they beat you really hard.
Yeah.
No mercy, nothing, just to see if you can handle this.
If
so
you
that
can
you
stand your ground, right? You don't want punks in your gang. But that's not it. Then you have assignments. So you consider what they call a peewee, like tiny locals. You just got in. So you get all the crazy stuff because the older guys have already put their work in. So they don't really have to do much. They just tell you, hey, go stab that guy, I need this kind of car. Go find it, steal it, bring it to me. So I was never really punked by older gang members because they had a lot of respect for me because I would always think through stuff. So I moved up very quickly in the gang world. And we did a lot of, I don't know if you like talking great in detail about things, but, robberies, and we robbed gun stores. And I was the one that planned it out. I was always the thinker.
Mastermind.
So even though I wasn't very old, I moved up quick. And then we had what was considered, in Arabic, you could say shura, like these gangs don't have a single leader. It's not like a kingdom where you have a single emperor. They have shot callers, they have OGs, veteranos, but they'll be multiple and they'll work it out. So our gang had a leadership council, which was 13 people. And the 13 number is symbolic, right? But usually it was 12 because one would either be dead and they'd be replacing them. It's kind of crazy. And later I was one of them.
How old were you when you reached a certain level?
So this is about 15, 16.
You were 15 years old, 16 years
15,
old?
16, yeah. We're teenagers, yeah. And we were burying our friends.
If you're comfortable answering this question, so at that age of 15, 16, did you commit like crimes?
Yes. We committed crimes every single day. Ranging from, so we had rules. One of the rules is no homosexuality. You couldn't kill women, you couldn't kill kids, you couldn't rape, you couldn't, all those were mamnu. Those are rules, red lines you couldn't cross.
That was my next question in terms of their values.
They had very strong values.
When Islam came to Arabia, Arabian had Jahiliyyah.
Yeah.
Something maybe we can compare it to gang or anything like that. In that Jahiliyyah time, Islam affirmed certain Jahiliyyah values that goes hand in hand with Islam.
True.
Is there values from that way of life?
For sure. So one of the things was, for example, if a particular gang member, and again, I want to preface this by saying that those may not be in place today. Once meth and crack and all those things hit, gangs became like chaotic. For us, at that time, this is late 80s, early 90s, the gangs had very strict rules. But I remember there was a gang member that we were trying to kill. And one day I saw him in our neighborhood, unarmed. We had him. But then he had his mom with him. And all we did was we went by and said, pointed, and he got it. And he remembered that. And at a time, he gave me a pass. Why? Because we had rules. If a gang member got put in prison, the gang would take care of his family. They would feed, make sure they're good. You weren't allowed to date a girl that another gang member was dating. And, especially if they were married, definitely hands off. And if you did, you would have punishments. The gang would hand out punishments. I'll tell you something funny. One time I was in a car, it was a lowrider, gangster car, all non-Muslims with me, and there was a big shot, we call the shot caller, who had been in prison for I don't know how many years, he did long-term prison. And at that time, I was, 13, 14, he was in his 30s, so imagine that he was all tatted and all that. And we were playing music, obviously, and there's a masjid in San Diego called Masjid Abu Bakr. It's got a big white dome. And you can clearly see it's a masjid. So we were going by it, and he told the guy, turn the music off. The guy turned the music off, right? Because he's a shot caller, listen to the OGs, right? And the guy was like, why? And he was like, you don't see a house of God? Now, he's not Muslim, right? And I'm in the car, I'm Muslim, right? Kind of. But he was that respectful of religion. Same thing you would do at churches. If you drove by a church, you turn the music off. They were very religious in their own way. But unfortunately, due to the corruption of Christianity, religion became more a way to deal with guilt than to fix yourself. So I would be with them, and basically, when we would have gang wars, and we would go at, this was daily, shootings and stabbings and killings, we would go to the Catholic priest and he would give us a little, a ta'weez, a little amulet to protect us. In Mexico, they have a saint for drug dealers, for cartels. He's known as the saint of the drug dealers, right? I remember one time we were at a party and we came out and we saw these enemy gang members. The guy who was driving was like, run him over. And we just hit him with a car. And one of the guys that we hit his knees bent backward, like we broke his leg. And the next day, we were in church. Saturday night, run over a bunch of guys. Sunday morning, we were in church.
Confessing.
Wearing a suit with grandmothers, tias and abuelas or aunts, and we go into a little box and you tell the priest, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Yesterday I hit a guy with a car, broke his knees, might have killed him, not sure. The priest would just be like, oh, that's bad, you shouldn't do that. And he'd be like, I'm a gang member. What we do, when it's on, right? And he'd be like, well, say these many Hail Marys and donate to the church, and we'll see you next week. And I'm like, all right, well, you come out of the confession box, woohoo, Jesus died for my sins, I'm good, And you wouldn't feel guilty anymore because you were like, well, Jesus is going to take the sins for me. But my friend's parents would think, oh, he's messed up, he's selling drugs, and we weren't like selling little drugs, we were like going into Mexico, because I live in San Diego, so we'd go into Mexico, work with the cartels, bring like major stuff over, we'd kidnap people and do all that, right? So they'd be like, okay, how do we fix them? Send them to church. The church would just be like, Jesus died for your sin, and you're like, okay, so that I don't have to deal with it. No, salvation is free. And you're like, oh, great, back to the gang world, And I remember being in church, and there was Bible study on Wednesdays, a church called Horizon. They would study the Bible, but they wouldn't really, not like we study the Quran, like word by word and tafsir. No, they would just read a passage and be like, how do you feel about it? Oh, it's great. How do you feel about it? Like, it makes me feel loved. You're like, oh, yeah, And I'd be there like, hey, these numbers don't match. These ages like 22, 40, but they would just skip big chapters. They would just be like, we're going to skip the next 30 verses. I'm like, hey, no, there's something very interesting. I just read this. They're like, that guy again, And my friends who were Christians and Catholics, vetting with church, they would be doing worse stuff. They'd be like doing stuff in the bushes, I don't want to, they'd be smoking weed, which was illegal at the time. They'd be selling weed in church, at least, getting numbers and doing. I wouldn't. I would actually be reading the Bible and I'd get kicked out.
Why would the church always push you away, push you off?
Because I ask questions.
So?
Nobody likes questions in church.
Why?
Because they don't have answers. Islam does. Because I would be like, hey, can you go to heaven without Jesus? And they'd be like, no, he's the stamp on the letter. You can't go without him. Like, well, what about people before him? They believed in the word. Like, well, what word? Like, yeah, the word. I was like, oh, they believe in the word. They don't believe in Jesus. And then they'd be like, get out. Like, people think I studied the Bible to debate. I didn't. I studied the Bible to learn. At that
was
time,
the birth of Sheikh.
That was the birth of the debates, right? I went to Catholic schools. I went to Protestant schools. I went to all kind of youth groups. I went to Sunday church. There were priests, the Catholic priests that used to help us in the gang world. Like if we had some things to hide, sometimes he'd be the best one to keep it secret.
Was there a specific moment or an epiphany that happened in your life during that time that made you change the way you're thinking in terms of what am I doing in this world?
Yes.
Where am I heading? Assalamu alaikum. Have you heard of the double effect? If we have 1,000 viewers for this video and every single person shared that video to someone, 2,000 will become 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 256, 512, 1 million view. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in Musnad Ahmad, Ad-dal al-khayr kafa'ilih. The one who directs you to the good action is the same as the one who does the action itself. So subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon and make sure you share this video. Now let's go back to watching the video. Was there a specific moment or an epiphany that happened in your life during that time that made you change the way you're thinking in terms of what am I doing in this world?
Yes.
Where am I heading?
So the gang world is not like movies, like bang, bang, and then you're like, still living. So, I had a friend that got stabbed in the heart with a screwdriver in front of me. And I was in high school at the time. And I remember still today, running up and then finding him and then holding him and looking at him. And, he's grasping and you can't take the screwdriver out. It's going to bleed more. So you're calling 911, you're skelling and it's very difficult because, you tell them it's going to be okay, but it's not. You see
That
him
was your
dying.
friend, your brother.
That was somebody I grew up with. I tell my kids, today kids, their biggest issue is like, oh, the Wi-Fi signal is not strong enough. I feel depressed. And we'd walk into school on Monday morning and be like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, your friend just got his head cracked open. He's in the ER. And you're like, oh. I can't tell you how many funerals I went to of my own friends growing up. And this is, if you look up the late 80s and early 90s, the Southern California was like a war zone. My middle school, Wilson Middle School in San Diego, had a drive-by. Middle school, that's 6th, 7th, 8th. We're sitting at lunch and they had a metal detector. That many kids brought guns and knives to school. We had to go through a metal detector to go in. We had a police officer, middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th. We had a police officer assigned to our school all day. That's his whole job every day that he was there. We had that much crime on campus. So that's funny because, sometimes you go to like the UK and they're like, we got knives, and you're like, oh no, you're gonna cut a sandwich for me, or you go somewhere and they're like, oh, this guy, he got punched, like, oh. And we're sitting in middle school with kids pulling out Uzis, right? And it was rough, it wasn't just that, the gang world is not just like that. So to be from the, we call the carnales, the leadership, you'd have to kill. It's called blood in. And once you get to that leadership council, you cannot leave. Blood out. Blood in, blood out. To get in, you got to kill. To get out, you have to die.
Wow.
So I had a friend who was from that council, and he got shot, and he became a paraplegic, meaning from his neck downwards, he was paralyzed. But he was still in the gang. He would still go to the hood, the place where we were going to post up, in a wheelchair and stand there, or sit there, or stand there. And he would still be part of the gang. And later he got killed because there was a drive-by and everybody could run, but he was paraplegic. He got shot. So he got shot, became paraplegic, and then later got shot and died for the gang. So
what is that incident?
There's so much. That's one thing, right? One of the things I'll never forget till today in my life is the smell of human flesh burning. Because we would get called into Tijuana, where you have the different cartels. The cartels would use us as foot soldiers. So when the cartel calls you, and the cartel has money, like they got money, you would go into the cartel place and they would have money stacked up on the ground, like in crates, like $100 bills stacked like this from the ground, and they would have assassins who were actual military people. They would have guns that the military, Mexico has strictest gun laws, but the cartel had every gun you could think of. They would have grenades. They were crazy. They were billions, they were making billions, right? So the cartel would call you, there's only two reasons. Either they're going to reward you and give you a task and it's going to be really great, and they're going to they would line up women, be like, take whatever you want. They would hand you stacks of money like this. Good job, here you go. Or they're going to kill you. And they would never kill you like that. They would kill you in a very painful way. So when you got invited at 16, the cartels can't imagine, the 16-year-old, like what problems do they have today, right? Imagine what I went through, right? At 16, they'd be like, the cartel's calling you. So you got to cross into Mexico. Now you're in a different country. In Mexico, at least at that time, pretty much today, the cartels ran the country. The police couldn't say anything to them. Military couldn't say anything to them. They could walk around with an AK-47 and the police would just be like, because it's a cartel. You mess with them, they're going to come massacre your family, and not in a nice way. Not in a just shoot them. They'll torture them, right? Like one time I remember we saw drums, like oil drums, but they had a really bad smell. Not like oh that stinks, like something you can't forget. Humans were burnt, and you could still see like the remains. No oil. So they would put you in there alive, light you up. What happened then is that I had a very good friend that I was very close with. And this is somebody I grew up with since I was, a young kid. And he was 2 years older than me. And he was one of the people from that top shura, the top mafia, council, the 13. Basically, he was like an older brother to me because I didn't have any brothers growing up. Like my father, from my mother, I'm the only child. My father had other kids from other women, but I didn't grow up with them, right? So I grew up as an only child, basically. And he was somebody that looked out for me. Like, he was always careful with me in school and everything. You know, it's like, he was 2 years older than me. And since childhood, he was with me. Like, he was such a nice person. Even though he killed people, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. He robbed people, he sold drugs, he broke the law. But he was a genuinely, I mean, I don't know. I see, it's weird when I say that and then I say he was a good guy, right?
Because he has the values that other people don't have.
So like, we used to hang out in his garage. His house was there, so all the gang members would stay up all night. They'd be doing drugs. Us, from the higher gang members, we couldn't do hard drugs because it would compromise you. But it would be selling drugs, you know, it'd be doing drugs, it'd be partying, they would be doing all kinds of bad things. But nobody was allowed inside his house because his grandmother and his mother and his sister were inside. So everybody had to stay in the garage. But when I would spend the night there, he would have me spend the night inside the house. That's how much he trusted me and was very close to me, and his mother knew me and his grandmother knew me. And I would say, ¿Cómo estás, abuela? Like, how are you doing, grandma, to her? And that's how I used to speak Spanish, because I speak to their families. But we would have a crazy lifestyle, like a lifestyle that's very hard to explain to somebody who hasn't lived it. So we were leaders, and we had a lot of power then, because we were 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, but we had the cartel on our back. We had $50,000 that you would be given and you'd be spending. You would have teachers knew you were a gang member, so they were very careful with you. So you would walk into a class, and a teacher who knew who you were would just be like, "Oh, you don't have to do homework. Yeah, you're good." Yeah, you know. I remember a very funny story. One time there was a principal, and then was Ariel. I remember him still today. And he came as a new principal to our school. And he was this tough guy. You know, you watch those movies where a principal comes and he's gonna fix the ghetto, right? And he's gonna like be the Batman, you know, so he came out and he was like, "You guys, I'm not gonna put up with the stuff that old principal put up. You guys are gonna straighten up." We're like, "You talking to me?" Okay. So then we were like, "All right, who's this guy? Okay, who are his kids? What school do they go to? They go to a private school? All right. Who do we know at that school? Well, we got people at that school. All right." So we would call those guys up, "Yo." And at that time, we didn't have cell phones, right? We had pagers and stuff. We told them, "Hey, that kid after school today, don't let him get on the bus. Take him for donuts." And they were like, "All right." And, you know, these are gang members who were always the coolest kids in the school. So when somebody's like, "Hey, you want to go to donuts?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm hanging out with the cool kids." So after school, they took him. And then after school, we went into the principal's office and said, "How's your son?" And he was like, "How do you know my son?" Like, "I don't know your son. I'm just asking, how is he?" Like, "He's fine." "Where is he at?" "He's at home." "I don't think so." And I mean, imagine I'm a 16-year-old kid, and then he calls his house, right? You know, there were old phones back then. And then he's like, "Son's not home. He wasn't on the bus." And then he's like, "I'll call the police. I'll get you arrested." What did I do? I was at school with you.
It's donuts.
I'm just, no. Nothing about donuts. I don't know where he's at. I don't know anything about it. I'm in school with you. Like, you've seen me all day, right? Call the police. Is it illegal to ask, "How's your son doing?" You know, just sit back and relax. And then, you know, he's freaking out. He calls the police. "My son didn't come home, make a report, calls this, calls that." We're sitting, you know, after school, just hanging out. And then he calls us back in. He's like, "All right, where's my son?" "How am I supposed to know where your son is? Not my son," right? And he's like, "I'll do anything, you know. I could find out where your son is to help you out. But let's just make some rules here. From now on, when I walk, you walk the other way, you know." And of course, you know, so after a while, called our friend at the donut shop, paged him. He calls us back, "Hey, put him on a bus home." Kid went home, nothing illegal. No, it's not illegal to take somebody out for donuts.
And you guys are 15, 16, planning
we're
these
crazy
strategies.
high school kids, yeah. We did crazy. We robbed gun stores by, you know, some crazy ideas. But I don't want to get into all that. So imagine that power, right? Like, we would go into a class and you'd tell the teacher what grade you're going to get. There were teachers we'd buy them off with weed, like drugs. There were teachers that we'd threaten. Teachers that we'd be like, "We know where your kids go to school." Teachers that we'd be like, "We know where you live." You know, there was a guy, he was a coach, you know, and he would mess with young girls, and that was against the rules. So we invited him to a party, and he was like, "Oh yeah, young kid, I'm going to be the cool young crowd," you know. Came, there was no party. He walked in the door, stabbed him in the neck. Didn't kill him, but he got the point, right? So now, next time he sees you in school, you know, he's like, so girls would be very attracted to that, even though it's not your looks or whatever, just the power that you would wield. So these girls would like meet you and they'd like give you the number and they'd be like, anytime, whatever. So one time on a Saturday night, my friend was like, hey, what are you gonna do? I was like, I got this number, I'm gonna go. And I was like, but I got this other number, so I don't know, So he was like, well, give me one, you take one. I gave him one, I took the other. And he went, and there was a payphone, he picked it up, go there and you would call for her to come out. And instead of guys came out with guns and many bullets were fired, 9 hit him, through the hand, through the chest, through the stomach, and shot him in the head, kind of 357. It's not like the movies, where you get shot and a little drip, took the whole back of his head off, right? But the setup was to kill me. Like it was particularly for me. But as Qadar would have it, my friend went in my place. Somebody you grew up with since you were a child. It's not fun and games, right? You can imagine somebody getting killed in a car crash or somebody dying from whatever disease, but you can't imagine looking at your friend that you grew up with 9 holes in them that have taken like these chunks off of them, It's rough. And that day, when we went to bury him, it hit me. Like I got into this gang stuff not on purpose, but I gotta get out because what am I doing? If that was supposed to be me in that grave. That's what the plan was. Qadar of Allah is different, but people's plans. Their plan wasn't to kill him, it was to kill me. So if Allah hadn't protected me, that would have been me. So when I looked at him being buried, I started to think, what's the point of life? Because we had money and we couldn't put them in banks. So you'd have them like stacks of money under your mattress or hidden in the house. You could bust out 10 grand like nothing. So we had money. We had cars. We had this lowrider that's together. We had bought it together. It was like this 64 Impala, chrome, ready, rims, hydraulics, leather seats. You could have amazing cars, right? Like for gangster cars. We had girls. He had 13 official girlfriends, let alone, the gang girls were, you're a leader. You could just be like, you. We had influence. I walked into a school. People, as soon as they heard shooter from East Side, which was also called Loke from AEK, so East Side is the gang, AEK was the crew for the gang, and right, it would just be like, whoa, your rep would go ahead of you, right? You graffiti, people be like, oh my God, that's him, But none of that went in the qabr with us. When I buried him, just him. No girl went in with him, no car, no money, no influence. It woke me up. Life's not about that. So I took a step back, started, okay, what's life about? Let's go figure it out. But I didn't go to Islam because that's not what I was around. Went back to church. I asked the preacher, my friend got killed. Well, he's going to heaven. How's he going to heaven? Well, he believed in Jesus. Yeah, but is he going to be accountable for all the stuff? Am I going to, if I get killed tomorrow, nah, you believe in Jesus, you go to heaven. So all right, if I do really good, I'm still going to heaven. If I do really bad, still going to heaven. If my friend who was in the thick of the gang world is going to go to heaven because Jesus died for his sins, then why would I change? That doesn't make sense. So I went to Buddhist temples. I went to Hare Krishna places, but no meat. I was like, that's not for me. I like meat. I went to a Catholic priest, and it was like, if you want to change, you can try to be a priest, get involved in this. And I was like, never get married, no women, forget that, bro. I don't like boys, I'm good. I went to Kingdom Halls, Jehovah's Witnesses, I went to Mormons, I went to Bible studies. I went to a Jewish synagogue, and they were like, yeah, nah, you don't want to be Jewish here. And I was like, no, I really want to learn. Like, nah, you don't. I was like, all right, guess not, see ya. I went all these places and I couldn't find answers, but there was a Jama'ah that was there visiting my city they were ethnic Pashtuns like me, but I didn't speak Pashto really well. I wasn't around Pashtuns. So they ran into me and they were like, hey, we have this thing at a masjid. And I was like, all right, let me go check it out. When I sat down with them and I started speaking to them, and there was a Sheikh, he had answers. I would be like, what about death? He would explain what happens in death. What about the qabr? He would explain. He would be like, you were held accountable for your deeds on the day of judgment, but Allah is merciful. So if you make tawbah, if you repent, and this is very important because a hadith about the man who killed 99 people, it really affected me. Because a man that killed 99, that's gangster. And then he killed 100. But he could still make tawbah. Allah could still forgive him. Killing 100 people. I never killed 100 people.